How much did my supercharger build cost? Stay tuned and find out. Welcome back to Beat Up Builds. My name's Daniel. If you're new to the channel, I have a Supercharged 22RE. I got the Supercharger for really cheap from a swap meet. It wasn't ever intended to go on the motor, but I built brackets, I made it all work, and it's been a lot of fun. It was a cheap build. And today we're going to find out how cheap was it actually. So I'm going to break everything down, what it all cost, and show you guys what I actually spent on it. So there's two parts to the build. The first part, I used the stock fuel injection and a FMU, a fuel management unit. I did another video on those if you don't know what they are. And then the second part is going to be going to standalone fuel injection. So I'm going to kind of break it down into two different parts. So there's kind of two different levels. You could go really, really cheap with the FMU, or you could see how much standalone fuel injection cost. So let's dive right in. Let's start with the best, awesomest part, the supercharger. So there's the first video of my M90 supercharger. I picked it up for $50 at the swap meet. It's from a Ford Super Coupe, and it's for a V6 3.8 engine. I didn't know what I was going to use it on, but for $50 I just couldn't pass it up. Eventually I decided to put it on my truck because I figured I got to use it, I got to do something with it. So the first step of the build before I really did anything else was to figure out how the heck I was going to get a serpentine pulley on the crank of the 22RE, which is only V-belts. It never came with serpentine. And basically after thinking for a couple weeks, the solution was right under my nose. I had a AC clutch with a serpentine pulley that I had pulled off of a car, just laying in the scrap pile. I was able to cut the center out and just weld it right onto the crank pulley, and that solved my problem basically. I didn't spend any money other than the welding gas and the wire basically, so that one was a freebie. So now that we got the pulley situation solved, we could finally work on the manifold and all the bracketry. So what I decided to do, it seemed like the easiest thing, was to keep the stock lower intake that has the injectors in it and all that stuff, and just make a manifold that attached to that. So basically remove the upper intake and have it attached there. That was the easiest solution that I could come up with, so that's what I went with. I ended up using some thick steel. I don't know how thick it actually was, maybe 1/4 inch. And actually, this is something that was kicking around for 10 or 15 years. I remember my dad and I found it in the, like out by a dumpster or something. It was like maybe this big, and it was like a triangle. I think it was for boats, for like the rudder basically. I think it was some kind of template to make a rudder or something like that. It was, I don't know, it was really interesting. We had it for a while. And I said, that's perfect. I already have that. That's gonna be plenty strong. So I used that for the adapter plate basically to the manifold. And I had to buy a hole saw for that. So I'm gonna count the hole saw. That was $13. I had the center piece, I just didn't have the actual hole saw. So that's the first, other than the supercharger, that's like the first thing I spent money on, was that hole saw to cut the holes. And then that plate, I used that, I basically built a structure. So I did that manifold, I made the manifold for the supercharger, and then I used a piece of the plate to triangulate it. So basically it was all tied in, and then the rear end of it was kind of like open, like there was gaps to fill in, but they didn't need to be as strong because that 1/4 inch plate kind of made a skeleton in the front there where the supercharger mounted. So that was all free other than the hole saw. And then I had a piece of exhaust tubing that I used for the majority of the back end there. Just a piece I had laying around, another freebie basically. and just some sheet metal. I think pretty much everything for that manifold was free other than the welding wire and the gas. So I did save a lot of money there just by having some random junk laying around, but other than the 1/4 inch plate, it's really nothing that wouldn't be laying around most people's garage. So really I didn't spend very much anything building that part of the manifold. I did, however, have to buy the throttle body piece. So I bought a piece of U-bend that went from back of the supercharger to the throttle body. I measured that and guesstimated and got really lucky with that. It worked out awesome. That was a 2.5 U-bend. That was about $40 though, that I had to spend on that. And then I think I cut a piece out in the back and welded another little piece in. That was just all scraps laying around. I think I did use a majority of the piece I cut out. And the plate on the back was also from that 1/4 inch plate. So that's basically all the manifold portion of it. And then there's some other pieces to it too. So there's a couple other things I had to buy. I had to buy the bypass valve. So basically that bypasses the around the supercharger. So instead of going through the supercharger, there's like a little tube that goes around with a valve. And you didn't really need that. I wanted to keep it because I figured it's going to keep it more economical. It's got a little bit better idle that way, allegedly. So to me, it made sense to just keep it. It wasn't going to cost too much to do that. I suppose maybe you could omit it and do this even cheaper, but I wanted to keep it. So I had to buy the bypass valve. That was $32. It's basically it's for a Subaru WRX. I know it's turbocharged, but it basically does the same thing. And it was just some generic knockoff, cheapest thing I could find. After I cleaned all the metal shavings out of it, it's been working pretty good. So I was glad I opened it up coincidentally before I used it. It was totally full of metal shavings. They never cleaned them out, I guess, or I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking, but it's been pretty good for $32 other than that. And then I had the couple silicone hoses, about $9 and $7 there. And then one other thing I also had to do to fit the belt is I couldn't run the factory fan anymore. It just wouldn't fit. I kind of wanted to try and do some kind of spacer, but I don't think anyone really makes a spacer that I need for that engine. So I just got rid of it. I went with an electric fan. I just bought the cheapest one off of Amazon. That was, I'm looking at my list here, $35 for the cheapest electric fan off Amazon. It did work good, so that was awesome. I ended up changing it, but it actually wasn't a fan, and I still have it and it still works. So it was halfway decent for $35. What wasn't so decent was the fan controller. I paid $18 for a fan controller off of eBay. It was the cheapest one I could find. It was one of those ones that you poke into the radiator. I thought I was being smart and saving it, making it last longer by mounting it inside the cab so it wouldn't get wet and running that tube out, which it never got wet, but it still ended up failing. It did last probably 9 months, so I'm still gonna count it. I eventually, by the time I got that far, I was with standalone fuel injection. I could just wire it in, but I'm gonna mention that there. Bear with me here. So then the other things that I needed were, I needed the serpentine belts. It took 2 belts because I shredded the first belt. Cut to the footage. So then I got a second belt, and knock on wood, that one's been fine ever since. So yay, I didn't ruin a whole bunch of belts. For testing, I had just an old serpentine belt that was longer, and I zip tied it just for testing purposes and to line everything up and kind of measure. So I only used 2 belts, the one I ruined and the one that's still on there now. So that's $30 there. I'll post my thing at the end here showing everything, but and then the other thing we needed was a boost gauge, obviously, so to see how much boost we're gonna run. So for this first rendition, I did not run a wideband. I would recommend running a wideband, but I was just super careful. I was reading the spark plugs, listening really carefully for knock. I was able to get away with it, but that is one thing that I don't have included on here. The other thing that we did the FMU. So I'm gonna put in the Vortec one because that's the one I pretty much used. It was pretty expensive. That was $290. And basically what that does, it gives more fuel under boost so it doesn't blow up. And for timing, I just turn a distributor back. So that's how I handled that. So that was $290. And then I also needed some hose, fuel hose. I spent $19 on, $7 on clamps. So that covered the fuel portion of it. And I did also get a fuel pump because the factory one, I don't know if maybe the factory one would have kept up, but my gauge, I was kind of confused. My gauge wasn't going any higher, but it ended up getting smashed on the hood a little bit, so it wouldn't go higher. So I don't know if I actually needed the fuel pump, but I'm gonna count it because it's probably not a bad idea. I just used one from a like Astrovan, I think it was. So that was $79. And then I threw in $10 for welding wire and $30 for welding gas. I honestly did a mixture of flux core and MIG welding. I tried to MIG weld where I needed things strong and flux core things that didn't matter so much. Just because really all I had was a flux core, and then I could go to my dad's and use his MIG for some stuff. And that's kind of what the first iteration was built out of. So all of that together on the stock EFI was $725, which really not too bad to give it a cool supercharger. And it did work pretty good on the stock EFI. I did have to tweak a little bit. I tweaked the airflow meter to get it to work right. And ultimately, it would work kind of crappy cold. It would stumble a little bit. But once it was warmed up, it worked really well. So it wasn't that bad for being stock EFI. If you know what you're doing, you could 100% like pull something cheap off like this with stock EFI and FMU. Is it the right thing to do? No. That's why I ultimately didn't keep that, but it worked really well to get started. I was building all this myself. It's a little bit easier, I guess, with like a turbocharger because you're not throwing belts and stuff like that. More or less, you just got to get the exhaust gas into the turbo and all that stuff. Like, to me, it seems a little bit easier. Where this, like, there's belt alignment, stuff like that. Oh, you know what? I don't think I mentioned. Let me mention. I forgot about the belt tensioner. So let me mention that. I used a piece of flat stock and angle iron for like the tensioner. I had just flat stock laying around. I used the bed frame that I had. I've used that a bunch of things. But I did also buy a piece of angle iron. So for that, I put $15 on there. That I didn't buy much, but I think I bought at least a piece of angle iron. And then the tensioner, I tried making it out of a Nissan Rogue belt tensioner. I had an extra one laying around. I bought a belt with a tensioner in like a kit, and it was Chinese, and the factory tensioner was good still, so I didn't use the Chinese one, and I had it laying around. So another thing that was just free, and I had. First I tried it with the automatic tensioner, but that didn't work out. And then I basically just took the pulley off of it and made a slotted tensioner. And that's what finally worked and kept the belt on and is working great to this day. So something else I didn't spend any money on there. But that's all it took to get it going. And then let me show you what it cost on the standalone fuel injection. So the stock EFI worked out pretty good. I used that as a stepping stone to figure out if it was going to work. And I also wanted to prove a lot of people wrong, because a lot of people say you can't use the stock EFI with boost. You guys, I proved you wrong. Don't say that again, because you can clearly do it. So you're all wrong, anyone that said that. But the standalone fuel injection is a lot better. That's why I went with it. I did look at Speeduino. I was seriously considering that, but for a little bit more money, I felt like the microsquirt ECU was much more robust and reliable. And it's a daily driver. That's what I was looking for. You might be able to go cheaper. If you go to a Speeduino, you might be able to do this a little bit cheaper. But I did the microsquirt. I got their GMIAT sensor with a pigtail. I got their wideband. I used as much from the Toyota stuff as I could. Like I used the temperature sensor from the Toyota, whatever I could use basically. And then I cut the factory ECU and soldered to the factory ECU connector so I could unplug and plug the microsquirt in. Basically because I wasn't sure if it was going to work. I had a spare ECU, and that's the route I went. So I spent about $887 doing all that, and it's kind of expensive, but that's what you get with standalone fuel injection. If you do a Haltech or something like that, it ends up being a lot more money. So this is the cheap route. Excuse me. And then I needed to do injectors because stocks I think are like 195 cc. I think I'm pushing it, doing 8 psi on those. And I also want to do E85 down the road and probably push a little more boost, like maybe 12, 13 psi. That's my ultimate goal. So I got new injectors with that goal in mind. I got 550 cc, and those were $100. Cheapest things I could find on eBay. They're for like a Miata. So I got those. That also kind of went hand in hand with the standalone. And then you might not have this problem, but I am stuck with an automatic transmission right now. I know they suck, but I needed a way to make it shift. The stock ECU outputs signals to the transmission computer, and since the stock ECU is gone, I don't have those signals. So I used an Arduino to replicate those signals, basically. I have a whole video up on it. If you want to watch it, I'm going to try and link it here. If not, it'll be in the description. I've never linked a video up here, so bear with me if that doesn't work. But I'm going to try and put that video up there if you want to do it. But basically, I used an Arduino and some pins to go into it, and some other, like a 12-volt USB converter and capacitor and some things. I probably spent about $64 altogether making that transmission. I don't necessarily want to call it a transmission controller. It's more of a replicator for the ECU outputs. It's not really a controller. You can adjust a little bit of shift points and things like that, but I don't want to call it a controller because it doesn't give you full control. It's more or less just replicating those signals. But that's what I had to do to go standalone. Just for that stuff, like forget the supercharger, like all that stuff I built here prior. Just for the standalone stuff, I'm at about $1,051. So if I add together the first costs, including the FMU, I'm just going to count it in here. It was my stepping stone. I did spend money on it. So altogether with that stuff and the standalone, I'm at $1,776. Go America. And I think that's pretty good, honestly. The first step, the 725, just to get it working and having it working decent and safe, that's pretty damn good. Yeah, good luck getting anything working for that cheap. That's really good. And then even with the standalone, 1776, that's really good. You know, if we didn't have that, count the FMU, we're at like 1,500. That's cheap. If you look at LCE's kit, I'm going to look at what the cost is, and I'll put the cost down here of the LC Engineering Supercharger kit that's comparable. But I'm guessing, and look down there, I'm guessing that's probably $4,000 or $5,000 before any fuel injection stuff. So, yeah, yeah, I mean, you'd be at 6,000, 7,000, I guess, you know. I'm at 1,700. That's way cheaper for probably similar horsepower numbers. Their manifold probably flows a little bit better, but for all that money, it's probably not worth the 5 horsepower or whatever you gain. So that's pretty good. I'm really proud and happy of that. I never calculated these numbers until now. I just was focused on getting it working as cheap as I could. I didn't add anything up as I was doing it. So I'm really happy to go back, add that up. And hopefully you guys think that's a great deal for doing all this. If you haven't watched my videos, it's been working fantastic. I daily drive it. I guess I've been driving it almost a year now with the Supercharger, and on the same belt. I haven't blown an engine up. I haven't really had any major issues or anything like that. I probably could use a catch can. The oil gets a little bit gross, but overall, that thing works amazing. Really happy with it. I hope I can build more crazy stuff like that in the future here. If you want to see me do stuff, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. That's what's going to enable me to build more things. I'm getting really close to being monetized. That's going to help a little bit. Probably what I'll do once I get monetized is just save that money until I can buy a microphone, because my audio sounds awful and it really drives me nuts. But I need a few $100 to get a decent microphone, and I'm broke. So like, comment, subscribe so my audio doesn't stink anymore. Give me ideas, leave me comments for ideas to do stuff. I don't know, I'm just trying to make a video every week and have fun doing it. So thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time, and have a safe New Year's, Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa, whatever you're celebrating. Be safe, and I'll see you next year.